Marcus Chen stood at the window of his quarters looking out at the crystal city that stretched before him. The buildings of the Zalathi homeworld looked like giant diamonds reaching toward the purple sky. Everything here was perfect, mathematical, and cold. He had been on this planet for 3 months now, and he still felt like a child lost in a museum where he couldn't touch anything. The door chimed softly, and Krixara entered without waiting for permission. She never waited. The Zalathi didn't really understand privacy the way humans did. Her body was made of living crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. She moved with a strange grace like water flowing upward. "Commander Chen," she said, her voice sounding like wind chimes. "Your evening nutrients are prepared." Marcus turned from the window and forced a smile. "Thank you, Krixara. You can just call me Marcus, you know." The alien's crystalline face didn't change expression. It couldn't. But the colors flowing through her body shifted slightly from blue to a deeper purple. That would be improper. "You are a guest of the Zalathi Council. Protocol must be maintained." She placed the tray on his desk. The food, if it could be called that, was a gray paste in a silver bowl. The Zalathi had analyzed human nutritional needs down to the molecular level and created this perfect food. It had everything his body needed. It also tasted like wet cardboard mixed with chalk. Marcus sat down and picked up the spoon. "How was your day?" Krixara tilted her head. The Zalathi always did that when humans asked questions they found illogical. "My day consisted of 24 Earth hours, as did yours." "It cannot be otherwise. I meant..." "Never mind." Marcus took a bite of the paste and tried not to make a face. He had learned that trying to explain human expressions and small talk to Krixara was like trying to teach a fish to climb a tree. The truth was, Krixara had been assigned to him as more than just a servant. She was a watcher, a guardian, and probably a spy all rolled into one. The Zalathi viewed humans the way humans might view particularly clever pets. They were fascinated by humanity's ability to build spaceships and travel between stars, despite what they called severe biological limitations. Humans couldn't survive in space without bulky suits. They needed constant food and water. They slept for a third of their lives. They could only see a tiny portion of the light spectrum. Their bodies were soft and broke easily. To the Zalathi, who could live for thousands of years and walk through the vacuum of space like it was a garden, humans were incredibly fragile. "The council reviewed your proposal today," Krixara said, watching him eat. She always watched him eat as if she was making sure he wouldn't choke on his food. Marcus looked up. "And they found it amusing." The colors in her body shifted to what Marcus had learned was the Zalathi equivalent of confusion. "Your species' insistence on voting for decisions is inefficient. The optimal solution for the asteroid mining rights can be calculated. There's no need for debate." "It's not about the optimal solution," Marcus said, setting down his spoon. "It's about what people want, what they choose. But what if they choose incorrectly? Then they learn from their mistakes." Krixara's body flashed orange. "That is inefficient. Mistakes can be prevented through proper calculation." Marcus had heard this argument 100 times since arriving. The Zalathi couldn't understand why humans didn't just let their computers make all the decisions. After all, machines could calculate the best outcome for any situation. Why did humans insist on making choices based on feelings and hunches? "Your stress levels are elevated," Krixara observed. "Your heart rate has increased by 12% since I entered." "I'm fine." "You are demonstrably not fine. You should rest." Marcus pushed the bowl away, only half finished. "What I need is some time alone." "Isolation is not recommended for your species. Humans are social creatures. Extended solitude can lead to psychological distress. Sometimes we need to be alone to think. Thinking is more efficient in groups. The Zalathi collective consciousness allows us to process information at exponentially higher rates than individual thought." Marcus stood up, perhaps a bit too quickly. "We're not Zalathi." "No," Krixara agreed. "You are not." There was something in the way she said it that made Marcus feel like a child being patted on the head. The Zalathi never said humans were inferior, not directly, but it was there in every interaction, every gesture, every perfectly logical explanation of why the Zalathi way was better. "I'm going to bed," Marcus said. "It is only 7:43 p.m. Earth Standard Time. Your usual sleep cycle begins at 10:30 p.m. I'm tired. Your biological readings do not indicate fatigue." Marcus walked to his bedroom door and paused. "Krixara, do you ever do anything just because you want to?" Not because it's logical or efficient, but just because. The alien was quiet for a long moment. Her crystalline form hummed at a frequency just at the edge of human hearing. I do not understand the question. I know, Marcus said softly. Good night. Sleep well, Commander Chen. After she left, Marcus sat on his bed and pulled out a small tablet from under his pillow. It contained his personal logs, the ones he didn't send back to Earth. In them, he wrote about his real feelings about this mission. The Zalathi were offering humanity incredible technology, medical devices that could cure cancer, energy sources that could power entire cities with a crystal the size of a marble, ships that could travel between stars in weeks instead of years. All humanity had to do was accept the Zalathi's guidance. But Marcus had been watching and listening. He heard the way they talked about humans when they thought he couldn't understand their harmonic language. He had taught himself to recognize certain patterns, certain frequencies. They called humans the soft ones and the confused children. There were discussions about whether humanity was ready for such advanced technology, or if they would hurt themselves with it. And then there were the other discussions, the ones about protection. The Zalathi were considering making Earth a protectorate. For humanity's own good, of course. They would manage human affairs, guide human development, make sure humans didn't destroy themselves with their emotions and their inefficient democratic processes. It would be a gentle conquest. No invasion, no violence, just a slow, careful taking of control, like adults taking sharp objects away from children. Marcus looked at the guitar case hidden in his closet. He had brought it against regulations, smuggled it in his personal effects. Music wasn't forbidden exactly, but it wasn't encouraged either. The Zalathi didn't have music. They had harmonic communication, but it was all meaningful, purposeful. They didn't understand doing something just for the joy of it. Tomorrow he would sit through another council meeting. He would present humanity's proposals, and the Zalathi would find them amusing or inefficient. Krixara would bring him his gray paste and watch him eat it. She would check his vital signs and make sure the fragile human was still functioning properly. But tonight, just for a few hours, he wanted to be himself. Not Commander Chen, not humanity's representative, not the confused child who needed constant supervision. Just Marcus, a man who missed his home and needed to feel something real. He didn't know that in Krixara's quarters she was filing her daily report on the human. She noted his elevated stress levels, his reluctance to consume the optimal nutrition, his request for isolation. She added these to the growing file of human behavioral anomalies. At the bottom of her report, she added a personal note, something she had never done before. The human asked if I ever do anything simply because I want to. I find myself unable to stop processing this question. It is illogical. It serves no purpose, yet I continue to think about it. This is concerning. She sent the report and tried to enter her rest cycle, but the question kept echoing in her consciousness. Want. What did it mean to want something without reason? And why did the human's question make her feel something she had no word for? Outside, the crystal city hummed with perfect efficiency. Inside his quarters, Marcus Chen pulled out his guitar and held it, not playing yet, just feeling the familiar weight of it in his hands. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more condescension disguised as concern, more questions about humanity's worthiness. But tonight, he would remember what it meant to be human. The next day's council meeting had gone exactly as Marcus expected. The Zalathi High Council sat in their perfect circle, their crystalline bodies catching the afternoon light that streamed through the transparent dome above them. They had listened to his proposals about the mining rights with what passed for patience among their kind. Then they had explained in their musical voices that sounded like a symphony of glass why humanity's ideas were sweet but ultimately flawed. Your species suggests profit sharing based on investment and risk, Chancellor Vrextor had said, his massive form glowing with a soft blue light. But risk is simply improper calculation. With correct analysis, there is no risk, only certainty. Marcus had tried to explain market forces, human ambition, the drive to explore and build. But how could he make beings who lived for millennia understand the urgency that came from having maybe 80 years if you were lucky? How could he explain hope to creatures who could calculate probability, down to the 1,000th decimal point? Now back in his quarters, Marcus loosened his formal diplomatic uniform and threw it over a chair. The sun, or what the Zalathi called the sun, was setting. painting the crystal city in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful in a cold, perfect way, like looking at a photograph of a place you would never really visit. He checked his schedule on the wall display. Krixara would come with his evening meal in exactly 43 minutes. She was never early, never late. After that, he had 2 hours scheduled for personal reflection and biological maintenance, which was the Zalathi way of saying free time and bathroom breaks. Then sleep at exactly 10:30 p.m., as they had determined was optimal for his circadian rhythms. Marcus walked to his closet and pulled out the guitar case. Just holding it made him feel better, more real. He opened it carefully, running his fingers over the smooth wood. It was his grandmother's guitar, made from earth oak before the forests became protected. She had taught him to play when he was 7 years old, sitting on her porch during summer evenings while fireflies danced in the yard. He sat on his bed and tuned the strings, wincing slightly at each sound. The quarters were supposed to be soundproof, but he still felt nervous. Music wasn't illegal here, but it was unexpected. The Zalathi made sounds to communicate information. They didn't understand making sounds just to make them. Marcus strummed a soft chord and the sound filled the room like warm honey. He closed his eyes and let his fingers find the familiar patterns. He started with something simple, a folk song his grandmother used to play. Then he moved to blues, the kind that came from deep in the chest, from a place that had nothing to do with logic or efficiency. He began to sing, softly at first, then louder as the music took hold. It was an old song about home, about missing someone, about the way the earth smelled after rain. His voice was rough from months of speaking carefully, diplomatically, but now it flowed free, carrying all the frustration and homesickness he had been holding inside. The guitar seemed to come alive in his hands. The strings vibrated with sympathy for his feelings. The wood resonated with warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. This was human magic, the kind that couldn't be calculated or optimized. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely real. Marcus moved into a faster song, his fingers dancing across the frets. He was lost now, completely absorbed. His eyes were closed, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm. He didn't notice the soft hiss of his door's environmental shield deactivating. He didn't see Krixara enter, carrying his evening tray of nutritional paste. But she saw him, and she stopped. In all her 500 years of existence, Krixara had never experienced what happened next. The sounds coming from the human and his wooden instrument hit her crystalline form like a physical force, but it wasn't destructive. It was something else. The vibrations were chaos. They followed patterns, but not logical ones. They rose and fell based on no mathematical formula she could identify. The human's voice wove through the instrumental sounds in ways that should have been discordant, but instead created something that made her entire being resonate in frequencies she didn't know she could produce. She stood frozen, and not by choice. Her body, designed to be perfectly controlled, was responding to the music without her conscious input. The colors that flowed through her crystal form began to shift and swirl in patterns that matched the rhythm. Blues became purples, became golds, became colors that the Zalathi had no names for. Marcus sang about rain. Krixara had never experienced rain. The Zalathi homeworld had no such weather, but somehow through the music she could almost understand it. Water falling from sky for no purpose except to fall, to feed the earth, to make humans run for cover or dance in the streets. He sang about a woman he had loved and lost. The Zalathi did not have love the way humans did. They had genetic compatibility assessments and optimal pairing calculations, but the way the human's voice broke slightly on certain words, the way the guitar seemed to cry with him, it created something in Krixara's consciousness that she had no framework for understanding. The song shifted to something faster, almost angry. Marcus sang about working all day in the sun, about rich men in tall towers, about the dignity of dirty hands and honest work. The guitar strings rang with defiance, with pride, with a fierce joy that came from struggle itself. Krixara's form pulsed with the beat, her internal harmonics trying desperately to match these alien frequencies. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the music softened. Marcus played a lullaby, something so simple a child could have hummed it. But in its simplicity was a complexity that made Krixara's consciousness spin. It was a song about comfort without purpose, about love without logic, about the feeling of being safe just because someone cared. The tray in Krixara's hands began to shake. She couldn't control it. Her perfect Zalathi control maintained for half a millennium was failing. The nutritional paste slid off the tray and splattered on the floor with a wet sound that finally broke through Marcus's concentration. He opened his eyes and saw her. His fingers stopped mid-chord, the last note hanging in the air between them like a question. Marcus jumped up, nearly dropping the guitar. "Krixara!" "I didn't. How long have you been—" She couldn't answer. Her vocal harmonics were completely disrupted. The colors in her body were swirling like a storm, something no Zalathi had experienced in recorded history. She took a step forward, then back, then stood still as if she had forgotten how movement worked. "Are you okay?" Marcus set the guitar carefully on the bed and moved toward her. "Krixara, what's wrong?" "Wrong," the word echoed in her mind. Yes, this was wrong. Everything about what just happened was wrong according to everything she knew. The sounds served no communication purpose. They conveyed no useful data. They were inefficient, chaotic, purposeless. And yet they had done something to her that 5 centuries of existence had not. They had made her feel. She didn't even have a word for what she was feeling. It was like suddenly discovering a new dimension of space that had always been there but no one had ever noticed. The sounds, she finally managed, her voice fluctuating wildly between frequencies. "What are the sounds?" It's music," Marcus said, still looking concerned. "It's just music. I'm sorry, I know I probably shouldn't have brought the guitar, but I just needed to play. Play." She tested the word. "You make these sounds to play?" "Well, yes. I mean, it's more than that. It's expression. It's art, Marcus struggled to explain something so fundamental to being human. "It's how we share feelings when words aren't enough." Feelings. Another word she understood in theory but had never experienced in practice. The inefficient biological responses you experience. "They're not inefficient," Marcus said, a bit defensively. "They're what make us human." Krixara's form continued to shift colors, though the storm was beginning to settle into something like a sunset, all oranges and purples and deep reds. "I felt," she said, and there was something in her harmonics that sounded almost like wonder. "When you made the sounds, I felt." Marcus stared at her. "You felt the music?" "I felt something, many somethings. Things I have no words for. Things that have no purpose. Things that should not exist in a logical universe." She paused, her crystalline head tilting. "It was the most extraordinary experience of my existence." The room was quiet for a moment, except for the soft hum of the city outside. Marcus looked at the alien servant who had been watching him for months, recording his every move, treating him like a fragile specimen. But now she seemed different. Smaller somehow, despite her 7-foot height. Uncertain despite her centuries of knowledge. "Would you—" Marcus hesitated, then gestured to a chair. "Would you like to hear more?" Krixara looked at the chair, then at him, then at the guitar on the bed. In 500 years, she had never done anything without a logical purpose. Sitting to listen to purposeless sounds was the most illogical thing she could imagine. "Yes," she said, and sat down carefully, as if she might break something. Not the chair, but something inside herself that could never be repaired. "Please." Marcus picked up the guitar again, suddenly nervous. He had played for crowds on Earth, but this felt more important somehow. He was about to share something essentially human with a being who had never imagined such things. Marcus played for 2 hours straight until his fingers were sore and his voice was hoarse. Krixara hadn't moved except to sway slightly with certain rhythms, her crystalline body catching and reflecting the dim evening light in patterns that seemed to match the music. The spilled nutritional paste had long since dried on the floor, forgotten by both of them. When he finally set the guitar down, the silence felt heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came after something important had been said, when words would only make things smaller. "I must report this," Krixara said finally. Her voice still had an unusual quality to it, like she was speaking through water. Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Report what? That I have a guitar? That I was playing music?" "No." She stood, and for the first time since Marcus had known her, the movement seemed uncertain. "I must report what happened to me. This is unprecedented. The council must know." "Krixara, wait." Marcus stood too, reaching out but not quite touching her. He had learned early that the Zalathi didn't like physical contact. "What exactly happened to you?" She turned to face him fully, and Marcus saw something in her featureless crystal face that he had never seen before. Despite having no eyes, no mouth, no expressions that humans would recognize, she looked vulnerable. "I experienced something beyond logic," she said. "Your music created responses in my consciousness that should not be possible. I felt what you call emotions, not as biological imperatives or chemical reactions, but as experiences. Pure experiences that existed for no reason except to exist." Marcus sat back down slowly. "And that's never happened before? To any Zalathi? Never. We communicate through harmonic resonance, but our frequencies are limited to information transfer. We can share data, thoughts, calculations. But what you did, it was communication without information, message without meaning, and yet it had more meaning than any communication I have experienced." She moved to the window, looking out at the crystal city. "For 500 years I have existed. I have served the council. I have performed my functions with perfect efficiency. I have never questioned why. But your music made me feel something I cannot name, and now I find myself full of questions." "What kind of questions? Why do we build cities that are beautiful if beauty serves no function? Why do we preserve the ancient crystal gardens when they provide no resources? Why does the sunset make us gather at windows when we could simply note the time and continue working?" She turned back to him. "Why did your music make me want to cry when I have no tears?" Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of something important happening. "Maybe," he said carefully, "the Zalathi have emotions too. You just haven't had a way to express them." "Impossible. Emotions are biological responses to stimuli, meant to promote survival and reproduction. We are silicon-based. We do not have the chemical processes that create emotions. But you felt something." "Yes." "Then maybe emotions aren't just chemical. Maybe there's something more fundamental, something that any conscious being can experience." Krixara's colors shifted to deep purple. "That would change everything we understand about consciousness, about the universe, about ourselves." She paused. "I must tell the council. They will want to study this." Within an hour, Marcus's quarters were crowded with Zalathi. They came in all sizes and colors, from the massive deep blue forms of the council members to smaller, younger Zalathi in shades of green and yellow. They filled the room, humming at frequencies that made Marcus's teeth ache. Chancellor Vrextor stood directly in front of Marcus, towering over him. "Demonstrate," he said simply. Marcus held his guitar, suddenly feeling like he was about to take a test he hadn't studied for. "What should I play?" "The sounds that affected Krixara, exactly as you played them before." I can play the same songs, but it won't be exactly the same. Music doesn't work that way." The Chancellor's hum deepened. "Explain." "Music is alive. It changes every time you play it. Even if the notes are the same, the feeling is different. It depends on the moment, the mood, the connection between the player and the listener. Illogical. Sounds are waves. Waves can be reproduced exactly. The physics can be reproduced. But music isn't just physics. It's human." There was a long moment of silence. Then Vrextor said, "Play." Marcus took a breath and began with something simple, a scale that became a melody that became a song. He watched the Zalathi as he played, saw their colors begin to shift. Some resisted, holding themselves rigid, their forms flickering between their normal hues and something else. Others, like Krixara, let it happen, their bodies becoming kaleidoscopes of color. He played a love song and saw confusion ripple through the crowd. He played a march and watched them unconsciously straighten. He played a lament, and the entire room dimmed as their forms darkened with something like sorrow. But it was when he played the lullaby, the same simple tune he had played for Krixara earlier, that everything changed. The Chancellor, ancient and powerful, began to resonate at a frequency none of them had ever heard from him. It was low, almost below perception, but it made everyone in the room stop and turn. Marcus kept playing, watching in amazement as Vrextor's perfect blue form began to show traces of other colors, swirls of gold and silver and soft pink. The giant being was trembling, though not from cold or fear. It was something else, something Marcus recognized because he had felt it himself when his grandmother had played this same lullaby for him. When the song ended, the room was completely silent. Not even the usual background hum that the Zalathi always produced. Every being in the room was still, their colors shifting and swirling in patterns that had never existed before in their species' long history. "What have you done to us?" Vrextor's voice was different, smaller somehow despite his size. "I haven't done anything," Marcus said. "The music just revealed what was already there. We have no capacity for these feelings. We are beings of logic and reason." "You are beings of consciousness," Marcus said, finding courage he didn't know he had. And consciousness, real consciousness, isn't just about processing information. It's about experiencing existence, feeling it, not just calculating it. A younger Zalathi, barely 200 years old, suddenly harmonized with a sound that could only be described as laughter, not the polite acknowledgement of humor that Marcus had heard before, but real, helpless, joyful laughter. "It tickles," she said. "The feeling it tickles inside where nothing has ever touched before." This started others. Soon the room was full of new sounds, Zalathi experimenting with frequencies they had never tried, expressing things they had no words for. Some were clearly struggling, fighting against the new sensations, but others embraced them, their forms dancing with colors that seemed to sing on their own. "This is dangerous," said Counselor Prexnan, her form flickering between rigid control and swirling emotion. "If we lose our logic, our reason, we lose ourselves." "No," Crixara spoke up, moving to stand beside Marcus. "We find ourselves. For the first time in our existence, we truly find ourselves. You have been compromised by the humans' influence. I have been awakened." Crixara's colors were steady now, a beautiful blend of her original blue with threads of gold and green. "We have spent millennia believing we were complete, that our logic and calculation made us superior. But we were only half alive. The humans, these soft, fragile, short-lived beings we thought needed our protection, they have something we never knew existed." "Chaos," Prexnan said dismissively. "Life," Crixara corrected. "Not just existence, but life. The ability to create meaning from meaninglessness, beauty from disorder, connection from isolation." Vrextor had been quiet, his massive form still swirling with colors. When he finally spoke, his voice carried harmonics none of them had heard before. It was still him, but more somehow. Fuller. Complete. "Show me more," he said to Marcus. "Show me what else your kind can do." Marcus set down his guitar. "Music is just one form. Humans have been creating art for as long as we've been human. Cave paintings from 40,000 years ago. Sculptures, dances, stories, food that's more than just nutrition. Clothes that are more than just covering." He pulled out his tablet and showed them images. The Mona Lisa's mysterious smile. The Taj Mahal built for love. Children's sidewalk chalk drawings. A grandmother's quilt made from old clothes. Street art on broken walls. Ballet dancers leaping impossibly high. Movies that made people cry over fictional characters. With each image, he explained not what it was, but what it meant. How humans created not because they needed to, but because they had to. How art was humanity's way of saying, "I was here, I felt this. I want you to feel it too." The Zalathi absorbed it all, some with wonder, some with fear, all with a growing understanding that the universe was far stranger and more beautiful than they had calculated. "We have a decision to make," Vrextor said finally. "Do we share this with all Zalathi? Do we risk our perfect order for this chaotic beauty?" "How can we not?" Crixara asked. "How can we know that this exists and keep it from our people? It would be like knowing about starlight and choosing to stay in darkness. It will change everything." "Everything needs to change sometimes," Marcus said quietly. "That's how we grow." The news spread through the Zalathi collective consciousness like wildfire, if fire could burn through crystal and song. Within hours of the gathering in Marcus's quarters, every Zalathi on the homeworld knew about the humans' music and what it had done to those who heard it. The reaction was immediate and divisive. Marcus woke the next morning to find his quarters surrounded by hundreds of Zalathi. Some had come to experience the music themselves. Others had come to stop what they saw as a dangerous contamination. Crixara stood by his door, not as his servant anymore, but as something like a guard or maybe a friend. "The council has been in emergency session all night," she told him. Her colors were steady now, having found a new balance between her original blue and the warm golds that seemed to appear whenever she spoke about the music. "There are those who want you expelled from our world immediately. Others want to study you. And some," she paused, "some want to learn." Marcus looked out at the crowd. "What do you want, Crixara?" "I want to understand more." The feeling your music gave me, it hasn't gone away. It's like discovering you've been living in a room with a door you never noticed, and now that door is open and there's a whole world beyond it. Before Marcus could respond, the crowd parted. Chancellor Vrextor approached, but he wasn't alone. With him were 5 other members of the High Council, and their colors told a story of division. 3 of them swirled with new hues while 2 remained rigidly monochrome. Commander Chen, Vrextor said formally, the Council requires a full demonstration. Not just for us, but for all Zalathi. We must understand if this phenomenon is universal or limited to certain individuals. You want me to perform? Like a concert? We want you to teach. Counselor Prexnan interrupted, her form still rigidly controlled. If these emotions are real, if they are truly part of consciousness itself, then we must study them properly. Scientifically. Marcus noticed how she said the word emotions like it might burn her. Emotions can't really be studied scientifically. They have to be experienced. Everything can be studied scientifically. Can you scientifically study the taste of chocolate if you've never tasted anything? Can you study color if you've never seen? The question hung in the air. Then Vrextor spoke. Show us, show all of us. The high amphitheater has been prepared. Every Zalathi who wishes to attend may do so. The high amphitheater was a massive crystal bowl carved into the planet's surface, able to hold millions of Zalathi. It was used for major announcements, scientific demonstrations, and collective decision-making. Marcus had never seen it full, but when he arrived that afternoon carrying his guitar, every surface was covered with crystalline beings. They hummed in harmonies that made the air itself seem solid. Some were eager, their forms already shifting with anticipation. Others were skeptical, their colors dark and muted. Many seemed afraid, holding themselves apart from their neighbors as if emotion might be contagious, which Marcus thought, maybe it was. A platform had been raised in the center for him. As he walked to it, the humming stopped. Millions of alien beings focused on one human with a wooden guitar. Marcus had played for crowds before, but nothing like this. His hands shook as he adjusted the microphone they had set up. Hello, he said, and his voice echoed across the amphitheater. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm not a professional musician. I'm not even a particularly good one. But music isn't about being good. It's about being human. We are not human, someone called out, and there was agreement from parts of the crowd. No, Marcus agreed. But you are conscious. You think you exist, you wonder. And if you can wonder, you can feel. He started simple, with rhythm, just his hand against the guitar's body. A heartbeat pattern that echoed across the amphitheater. Boom, 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 boom. He watched as some Zalathi began to pulse with it, their lights flickering in time. Then he added strings, 1 note, then 2, then a chord. The sound waves rippled through the crowd physically, but something else rippled too. Colors began to appear in some of the Zalathi, tentative at first, like dawn breaking. Marcus began to sing. He chose an old Earth song about working on a chain gang, about suffering and solidarity, about finding dignity in the darkest places. His voice grew stronger as he went, fed by the energy of millions of beings experiencing something entirely new. The reaction was immediate and varied. Some Zalathi began to resonate with frequencies they had never produced before. Others fought against it, their forms flickering between states. A few simply shut down, going dark and silent rather than face the change. But most began to transform. It started with the younger Zalathi, those only a few centuries old. They had less to unlearn, fewer millennia of pure logic to overcome. Their forms burst with color like flowers blooming and fast forward. They began to move, not with purpose but with joy. Some spun in place. Others reached toward their neighbors, seeking connection beyond the collective consciousness. Marcus moved through different songs, different emotions. A sailing song that spoke of adventure and freedom, a blues piece about lost love, a children's song about animals that was silly and fun and meaningless in the most meaningful way. With each song, more Zalathi joined the transformation. He watched an ancient Zalathi, probably thousands of years old, suddenly pulse with silver light that looked like laughter. A group of young ones near the front began harmonizing with his guitar, not copying it but complementing it, creating something entirely new, a fusion of human and Zalathi expression. But it was when he played the lullaby, that simple melody his grandmother had taught him, that the real breakthrough came. The entire amphitheater went quiet except for his voice and guitar. The song was about safety and love, about being held and valued not for what you could do but for who you were. Chancellor Vrextor, standing at the edge of the platform, began to sing. It wasn't words. The Zalathi didn't have vocal cords like humans, but he modulated his harmonic frequency to match Marcus's melody, adding layers that no human voice could create. It was hauntingly beautiful, like hearing the earth itself sing. One by one, others joined in. Not all, but many. Thousands, then millions of voices, each adding their own frequency to the song. The amphitheater became a massive instrument, the crystal walls resonating with the combined sound of two species finding harmony. Marcus stopped playing, but the Zalathi continued. They had taken the simple human lullaby and made it something more, something that belonged to both species. He stood there, one small human among millions of giant crystal beings, and felt tears running down his face. When the song finally ended, the silence was profound. Then Counselor Prexnan, who had been the strongest opponent of the emotional awakening, stepped forward. Her form was no longer rigidly monochrome. Threads of deep purple and gold ran through her like cracks in ice. "I was wrong," she said, her harmonics carrying across the amphitheater. "I believed that logic and emotion were opposites, that one destroyed the other. But they are not opposites. They are partners. Logic tells us how to build a ship to cross the stars. Emotion tells us why the journey matters." A younger Zalathi called out, "How do we learn more? How do we create this music ourselves?" Marcus held up his guitar. "This is just one instrument, one way of making music. You have abilities humans don't. You can create frequencies we can't even hear. You could make music no human has ever imagined. Teach us," the crowd hummed in unison. "Teach us to feel." Over the next days, the transformation accelerated. Zalathi began experimenting with their harmonic abilities, creating what they called song forms. They weren't quite like human music, but they weren't like anything the Zalathi had done before either. They were something new, born from the meeting of two kinds of consciousness. Crixara became Marcus's assistant in a new way, helping him understand which frequencies created which emotional responses in the Zalathi. Together, they developed a kind of musical language that both species could share. Some Zalathi struggled with the change. Emotions were overwhelming for beings who had never experienced them. There were those who retreated into isolation, unable to process the new sensations. Others became almost drunk on feelings, swinging wildly from joy to sorrow to anger without control. But most found a balance, integrating emotion into their logical frameworks rather than replacing one with the other. They discovered that feelings could inform logic, that intuition could lead to insights calculation couldn't reach. Marcus watched all of this with a mixture of pride and worry. He had never intended to transform an entire civilization. He had just wanted to play his guitar, to feel human in an alien place. But sometimes the smallest acts had the biggest consequences. One evening, as he sat with Crixara watching the sunset paint the crystal city in new colors that the Zalathi were only now learning to truly see, she asked him a question. "Do you realize what you've done? Started a revolution? Started an evolution. We were complete in our incompleteness, perfect in our imperfection. We never knew we were only half alive until you showed us the other half." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Are you happy with the change?" Crixara's form shimmered with a color Marcus had learned meant contentment, mixed with excitement. Happy. Such a small word for such a large feeling. "Yes, Marcus Chen, I am happy. For the first time in 500 years, I am happy." 6 months had passed since the concert in the high amphitheater. The crystal city looked the same from a distance, but up close everything had changed. Colors danced across the surfaces of buildings as the Zalathi inside experienced and expressed emotions. Music, or something like it, drifted from windows. Garden spaces that had been precisely geometric were now wild with crystalline growths that served no purpose except beauty. Marcus stood in the newly built Cultural Exchange Center, a massive structure that looked like a frozen wave of rainbow light. It had been designed not for efficiency but for inspiration, the first Zalathi building ever created with feeling as its primary purpose. Earth's response to his reports had been confusion, then skepticism, then amazement. They had sent a team of musicians, artists, poets, and dancers. The Zalathi had sent their own newly formed artist collective to Earth. The exchange had begun. "The High Council will see you now." Krixara said. She wasn't his servant anymore. She had become something like Earth's first emotional ambassador to the Zalathi, helping both species understand each other's ways of feeling. Marcus walked into the council chamber, carrying not his guitar but a thick document, the result of months of negotiation. But these hadn't been negotiations like before, with the Zalathi dismissing human ideas as illogical. These had been true discussions with both sides contributing, both sides learning. Chancellor Vrextor stood at the center of the council circle. His form now permanently held threads of gold and silver, along with his original blue, like veins of precious metal through stone. The other council members were similarly transformed, each finding their own balance between logic and emotion. Commander Chen, Vrextor began, then stopped. No, that's not right anymore. Friend Marcus. The word friend carried harmonics that hadn't existed in the Zalathi language 6 months ago. They had to invent new frequencies for concepts like friendship, love, hope, and humor. Friend Vrextor, Marcus replied with a smile. The document you carry, is it ready? Marcus placed it on the crystal podium that rose from the floor. The Treaty of Mutual Enrichment. Not a trade agreement, not a protection pact, but something new. Counselor Prexnan, who had become one of the strongest advocates for emotional integration, leaned forward. Explain it to us as you would explain music. Marcus took a breath. For centuries, different human cultures have enriched each other through exchange. Food, music, art, stories, dances. Each culture kept its identity but grew by experiencing others. This treaty proposes the same between our species. The Zalathi will share our technology, Vrextor said, his harmonics indicating what humans would call excitement, our medical knowledge, our energy systems, our space travel capabilities, but not as charity to a lesser species. And Earth will share our arts, Marcus continued, our music, our literature, our films, our games, but not as curiosities for a superior species. As equals, they said together. The treaty was unlike any document in diplomatic history. Alongside clauses about mining rights and trade routes were agreements about cultural festivals and artist residencies. The Zalathi would help Earth cure diseases and travel the stars. Humans would help the Zalathi explore the full spectrum of consciousness. There is one more thing, Vrextor said. The matter of protection. Marcus tensed. This had been the original fear, that the Zalathi would force Earth into a protectorate. We withdraw all proposals for Earth's protection. Vrextor continued. But we offer something else, partnership. The galaxy is vast and holds many dangers. We have technology. You have something else, something that may be more powerful. What's that? The ability to find connection with any consciousness. You showed us that emotion is universal. If you could reach us, beings of living crystal who had forgotten how to feel, who else might you reach? What other bridges might you build? Krixara stepped forward. We propose a joint exploration mission, Zalathi and humans together, seeking new civilizations. We will offer them technology. You will offer them art. Together, we will offer them completeness. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. You want humans to be ambassadors of feeling? We want humans to be teachers as you have been teachers to us. The galaxy is full of species that have achieved spaceflight, but how many have achieved what you call soul? The council voted and it was unanimous. The Treaty of Mutual Enrichment was signed, not with styluses or pens, but with a concert. Marcus played his guitar while the entire council sang in harmonics, creating a song that was recorded in both human audio and Zalathi crystal memory. The news reached Earth 12 hours later, transmitted faster than light through Zalathi technology. The response was immediate and explosive. Humans had gone from being the galaxy's children to being its music teachers. The technology the Zalathi offered would advance human civilization by millennia. But more importantly, humans had validation for something they had always suspected, that their emotions, their arts, their messy and chaotic culture had value beyond measure. The first joint human-Zalathi ship was built within a year. It was a marvel of engineering and art, Zalathi crystal structures that could survive anything space could throw at them, decorated with human murals and filled with music halls alongside laboratories. It was named Harmony's Dream in both languages. Marcus stood on the bridge of that ship, looking out at stars that seemed less cold now. Krixara stood beside him, her form shimmering with anticipation. Behind them, a crew of both species prepared for departure. Where to first? Krixara asked. The Proxima system, The Zalathi detected signals suggesting a mechanical civilization there. Pure artificial intelligence, no biological component at all. Do you think music will reach them? Marcus thought about it. Maybe not music, but something. Art finds a way. It always does. They launched to the sound of 1,000 Zalathi singing in harmony with a human orchestra. The music was broadcast into space, a calling card from two species who had learned that the most advanced technology in the universe might be the ability to feel. As they traveled, Marcus worked with the Zalathi to develop new forms of artistic expression. The Zalathi could create sculptures of pure light that humans could walk through, feeling emotions as physical sensations. Humans taught the Zalathi about poetry, about how words could mean more than their definitions, how silence between notes could be as important as the notes themselves. They found the mechanical civilization exactly where the signals had indicated. The machines were confused by the organic and silicon visitors, beings who used inefficient communication methods and made decisions based on non-optimal criteria. They were even more confused when Marcus suggested they might enjoy music. But when a young Zalathi named Trixum, who had been born after the emotional awakening and had never known a world without feelings, created a light symphony that translated music into mathematical patterns, something clicked in the artificial minds. The machines didn't feel emotions the way humans or Zalathi did, but they discovered something else, an appreciation for patterns that served no computational purpose, algorithms that created beauty instead of solutions. They called it aesthetic mathematics and became obsessed with creating more of it. News of the success spread through the galaxy. Other species began reaching out, curious about these humans who had somehow taught living crystal to feel and machines to appreciate beauty. Each contact was different. Some species experienced emotion through taste, others through electromagnetic fields, still others through quantum entanglement. But in every case, humans found a way to connect. Through music, dance, painting, sculpture, poetry, cooking, or forms of art that had to be invented on the spot, humans built bridges. They became known throughout the galaxy not as warriors or scientists or engineers, though they were all of these things. They became known as the species that could teach any consciousness how to feel. 5 years after that first concert in Marcus's quarters, Earth hosted the first Galactic Festival of Arts. 17 different species attended. The Zalathi performed light symphonies. The machine consciousness created mathematical poetry. A gaseous species from the Orion Nebula painted with stellar winds. And humans, small and fragile humans, moved between them all playing music, telling stories, teaching and learning in equal measure. Marcus, now Earth's chief cultural ambassador, stood with Crixara watching the festival. His hair had grown gray at the temples, the stress and joy of the last year's showing. But his eyes were bright as he watched a young human girl teach a crystalline Zalathi child how to finger paint, both of them laughing in their own ways. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked. "The change? Sometimes I wonder if I had the right to transform your entire civilization." Crixara's response came in the form of a new expression the Zalathi had developed, a swirl of color accompanied by a harmony that meant something like joy, mixed with gratitude, mixed with affection. "You didn't transform us, Marcus. You revealed us. We were always capable of feeling. We had just forgotten. You reminded us, and now the galaxy sings, each species in its own way, but all together. You humans were thought to be the weakest spacefaring race, but you have given every species what technology never could. What's that? A soul.